Hello, Marissa.
Hello, Melina. How are you?
I am excited.
I am super excited. I think this conversation is one that we have a lot, but I'm excited to share it with everyone.
We have this a lot. And to kick things off, let's get going
Yeah.
because my world and your world's colliding in this conversation in some really cool ways. Most of you know I work with leadership development and I'm working with lots of leaders and managers at various levels who face challenges being leaders, being managers, and want to be better.
Yeah.
And Marissa, tell the world what you do.
I help the managers who want to be better.
There you go.
I help with systems and ways to make life easier for anyone who's overwhelmed in business. That could be with feedback or something else.
That is the technical description of what Marissa does. The real description of what Marissa does is she fixes things.
Yeah.
I have been working closely with Marissa over the past several months. She has single-handedly revolutionized the way that I run my business, the way that I do my business. And as we've been talking recently, I realized that there are a couple specific things that a lot of my clients deal with that I think Marissa's genius AI, tech, and systems background can really help with. One of those is around feedback. Now,
Yeah.
feedback is a big word, but what I'm talking about specifically is how managers and leaders give feedback, positive, negative, and constructive, to their teams, to their colleagues, to their superiors, to their leaders, feedback. Now, I talk about feedback because feedback is one of the points of failure for a lot of leaders.
It's
It's
hard.
really, really challenging, and it's emotionally charged and challenging. It takes a lot of grace and delicacy to give feedback, and a lot of people struggle with it. And the result is that most people don't give feedback. There's a lot of data to support that people need and want feedback, no matter whether it's positive or constructive, but there's a real need for feedback. And to put this into context with some data points, which I love, I looked up some research, some recent data on this, and it's estimated that 44%, so almost 50% of managers said giving negative feedback is stressful, right? 21% and probably much higher avoid it altogether. And I know that when I was a manager, I also avoided it. But that doesn't help you and it doesn't help your people.
Yeah.
Almost 70%, 65% of employees say that they want more feedback on how they're doing and how they can do it better. So we've got a gap here that
We
we want
do.
to close. And so I was talking to Marissa last week about this challenge that a couple of my clients are facing. And she said, I think I have a solution for that because Marissa's specialty is fixing problems. So,
Yes. I'm just going to go into it. The way my brain works is always like, okay, here's a problem. What resources do we have? How can we solve said problem? One of the biggest resources we have today to address this problem is AI. AI does come with its own set of considerations. If you can use AI in your company, this is a solution for you. If you can't, there's still probably some ways you can look at this, but always work within the boundaries that you have. But I use it for my own self by using like the power of transcripts, like looking at the transcripts. What have I said? Like, did I say that correctly? Did I not say that correctly? Did that land with my client? How could I say this in a way that would fit with my client? So I was talking to Melina about this and I was like, oh, this might be a solution for feedback because I also have been a manager and also not manager. And yeah, it's like feedback is this big elephant in the room and there's a lot of pressure from upper management to give feedback. Sometimes the manager's whole job is to give feedback, but that takes like nervous system regulation on the manager's part and on the employee's part. And one thing I love about AI is it is completely emotionless. It can get that feedback in a way that isn't going to stab me in the heart.
exactly. Now, what we want to talk about today is how can you leverage AI and things like ChatGPT, Claude, if you preferred that? How can you leverage this sort of human emotionless bit of that while combining it with the fact that you're not a robot and we
Right.
need that human touch? This is a really beautiful example of how great managers can leverage AI to become even better managers, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it all starts with providing examples. Using a transcript is a great way to let not only yourself, but AI know who, like what you sound like, who you are, and also the person you're talking to in that transcript. What are they
Mhm.
saying that they need? What signals are they sending? You can also collect different versions of feedback that you have given before that have been received well and put those together. Say, hey, ChatGPT, or hey, Claude, whichever you want for this journey. These are examples of what I sound like when I'm giving great feedback. Help me craft for this really difficult situation, feedback for this person. And then you can also use that transcript to say, this is what this person sounds like. This is what this person needs. This is what this person is signaling. And it
Mhm.
takes emotional labor away from you and puts it in front of you. I'm not saying copy and paste any of this feedback and give it to someone, but it giving myself the opportunity to respond to it and see if that's like, is that what I want to say? Or, oh, I never thought I could say it that way. And so I find collecting transcripts very powerful to help me do that. Also, examples of what's good and what's not good.
Mhm. Yeah, those are great examples. And so if we think about what are some concrete ways you as a manager can use something as basic as ChatGPT
Yeah.
to improve your feedback or even generate feedback, I think one is, to your point, generating feedback. So I often think about times when I was running a research team when someone on my team would give me a report that they had drafted and there were a lot of issues with it or things were missing or there were some errors,
Yeah.
right? First, I would sit down and write out all the things that were wrong. But then I'd have to massage it and figure out how am I going to present this. One of the things you can do is just take that draft bulleted list or even record yourself saying it and put it into ChatGPT and give it a little bit of context, such as I'm the manager. I want to help my analyst improve on their
Mm-hmm.
deliverables. These are the critiques I have of a presentation they recently gave or a report they recently drafted. Craft me a diplomatic way of sharing this with them in a way that encourages them to learn and grow from this. Done.
Done. And you can even add, if there's criteria given to the employee before that, like a rubric, you know what that means, something like that, then, even GPT could go back and say, okay, this is great feedback, but also it's not aligned with what you asked this person to do, or it is aligned with what you asked this
Yeah.
person to do, and get even more complex and more in-depth feedback. Because I think part of the mind game in giving feedback is you can say very general things, but you're really thinking you're saying something very specific. And the person needs to hear the specificity. They
Mhm.
need to know what exactly is it. Do I need to move 2 degrees to the right
Right.
or 1 degree to the right? Get
Right.
that detailed.
Yes. And helping really smooth the messaging of it.
Yes.
Because here's
Yeah.
another example. That first example was crafting the feedback first and foremost. Another example is improving the feedback that you're giving. A good friend of mine called me up last year and she was like, can you help me with something? I have to write the annual review for someone on my team and I'm struggling. I've spent hours trying to write this thing. Here's what I want to say. And he was
Mm-hmm.
quite harsh. I
Mm-hmm.
read it and I went, whoa, that's harsh. And she's funny. And there were some cultural differences because the country where she's from is a little bit more direct than the country where she's working, right?
Mm.
In the workplace. She said, I've gotten feedback that I tend to be a little too direct with things. So I'm trying to figure out how to craft this in a way that doesn't seem so harsh. Can you help me? And so
Yeah.
that's another great example. Let's say you're filling out the annual review form for someone, and maybe you've gotten feedback that you're a little direct or the opposite, that you're not direct enough. You can put that into ChatGPT and say, hey, improve it in these ways, right?
Of
So
course. Yeah.
she could have saved hours of agony thinking through the best way to position this. And she wasn't sure how to because there were cultural differences as well in how they communicated. So I think that's another good one.
I would say also like to consider the neurotype of the person you're giving the feedback to as well. If you have information on any of that, like, as someone who's neurodivergent in the workplace, feedback was always a really hard thing for me to go through. And also giving feedback because I am direct, and I'm direct because I care. I would always be told, Marissa, your communication style, like you just really, like, we know you mean well, but you really got to fight. So then it would take me 3 hours just to send one email where I'm just thinking through, okay, this is what I want to say, but then how's the person going to respond to it? And if I had something like that when I was giving this feedback, or like ChatGPT when I was giving that feedback, I could say, like, this is what I want to say. This is what I've been told is not that great. And this is how I want the person to feel at the end. Because I think that's most important too, because then you're building that trust. It's like that saying, friends tell friends bad things, friends have the hard conversations. You need to do that in the workplace. Now more than ever, because of all the ambiguity and change in the world, building that trust and delegating some of this work to ChatGPT can help you take your own space and regulate your own nervous system as well. In your example, that person has all of these things, like, because I know I had all these things like running around in my head, and it's hard sometimes to get them out. But if I had a GPT or a prompt that I have used multiple times, that's a decision I've already made. I've already said, this is how I want this feedback to
Mhm.
go. And
Yeah.
so half of the work's already done. I don't have to like start from scratch every time.
I think that's a perfect example of how you combine automation, ChatGPT, robot sort of standardization with personalization. So,
Yeah.
in your example, what you said is, let's say I'm the manager and you are on my team and I want to give you feedback. What's really great is for me to share with ChatGPT a little bit more information about
Yep.
you and how you prefer to receive feedback. If there are teams out there who have done DISC assessments, who have done any sort of Clifton Strengths, any sort of communication profiles. One of the things you can do is ask folks on your team to provide those profiles to you if they're open to it, so that when I go to provide Marissa feedback, I can say, ChatGPT, provide this feedback, but take into account Marissa's DISC profile or
Yeah.
Marissa's Clifton Strengths. Because one of the things a lot of these communication assessments, and I've run a lot of DISC workshops, is really helping people understand how individuals prefer receiving feedback, which is often something we don't ask each other. So, one
Right.
of the things in a recent DISC workshop that I ran is I had every single person in the room write down how they prefer to receive feedback, and then they shared it with their colleagues. Right. And so you're doing the same thing here, making it much more effective where I can give feedback via ChatGPT, but I can tweak it so that
Yeah.
it's positioned in the way that will be most effective, most impactful, and most helpful to Marissa.
Absolutely. Or I know there are some workplaces that do how to work with me documents
Mhm.
before introducing yourself to a team. Again, get consent, get permission, get all of these things. But you can collect, like, if I were a manager, I might have my ChatGPT set up with a project for every single employee. And in there might be transcripts from conversations, disc assessment, strengths profiles, things like that, but also progress reviews or an email that I had sent, anything that could give context to an output from the GPT is going to take away any of that. Oh, this was written by ChatGPT. I know it might have an M dash. Like, yes, it might. But the more detail and the context you give it, the better it's going to be for yourself and everyone. In doing this, I have asked myself questions, at least in regards to my clients. It's helped me become a better person for them because it's
Mhm.
highlighting some things. It's giving me time to reflect and answer questions. Sometimes it even asks me, did you mean it to sound like that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like a two-way street benefit type of thing. But again, as much information you can provide. If you have your own disc profile and someone else's, you could say, what are the content or the feedback clashes that might happen here and how can I avoid them? Because we can't change people. People have to change themselves. But I can become aware, like, whoa, this person is not a chocolate ice cream person. This person is definitely a vanilla ice cream person, but there is a commonality of ice cream.
Yeah.
So how can we build that bridge together? And so I really think that it's a great way to explore the relationships within the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are, I think, two really concrete ways that you can be using ChatGPT to improve your feedback, to tailor the feedback, and really strengthen your communication and relationships with your team. The same goes with constructive or positive feedback. That's
Yeah.
something a lot of managers overlook. There are certain folks on your team, certain disc profiles, certain personality types that really need feedback on a regular basis and need positive feedback. I'm someone, for example, and I know they say millennials grew up with getting prizes for everything. And yes, it's true. So I really thrive off of being told, this was good. This worked. I like this. Now, that doesn't mean I can't take and don't want the constructive feedback, but it really drives me forward knowing that I'm in the right track.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going
Yeah.
in the right direction. And so different people function on different kinds of feedback. And so you want to be aware of that just so that you're checking in and doing that. And then the third way that you can be using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever this is not a ChatGPT ad, I promise. I'm using ChatGPT to reference any sort of chatbot, right?
Yeah.
So pick your poison. But the third thing that I thought about when we talked about this was you could really use ChatGPT, whichever one, to actually come up with the feedback itself. So, one example, if we go back to the example of me when I was running a research team and an analyst would give me a PowerPoint for a presentation, one of the things you can do, instead of you going in and going, oh my goodness, there's so many issues with this, I've got to write it all out, I've got to put it in ChatGPT, then I've got to figure out how to relay it to this person. What I could do is say, hey, John, my analyst, let's hop on a call, let's look at this together. And what we can do is put the presentation
Yep.
into ChatGPT, of course, as long as that's allowed and there are no privacy implications. You need to check your rules at your organization, but you
Yeah.
can put it into a ChatGPT and give it a little bit of context about what the goal of the presentation is, who the audience is, and then say, ChatGPT, will you act as a senior executive who is expert at giving presentations and tell me some positives and some negatives to the attached presentation and tell me some ways you think we can improve it.
Yeah.
You and your employee get to look at this together
Yeah.
and discuss the feedback. And so it removes from your shoulders the need to kind of give all the feedback and make it seem like it's all coming from you. You can look at it together and discuss and say, actually, yep, I agree with this. I think we could improve it this way. But it removes some of that awkward tension that might come from you providing the feedback yourself.
Yeah, it moves where you are, right? If you're giving feedback, one person could be either on the other side of the screen or across from the table. But when you have something like this, a tool like this, you're moving to be sitting right next to the person you're giving feedback to. You're going through this with them. That's trust building, that's team building, that's everything people want in a workplace. It's really powerful when you're using something like this because it's something that can be trained. So it's not like you have to think, what is the feedback? What is the A plus model? You can have your own collection of good presentations and bad presentations, save them in a document. And then you could just say, based on this document, look at this presentation and let me know if this is good or bad and give the feedback. I wouldn't say bad in front of an employee, but you know what I'm saying. Like red
Effective.
or green. Yeah.
How is this presentation effective and achieving the
Yeah.
goals that we have stated, the objectives we have for the presentation, and in which ways may it be falling short, or may we have opportunities to improve it or optimize it?
Yes. And it also gives you an opportunity if you have built this into something that other people can access, which is something called a custom GPT. You can then provide feedback when you're not there. What if you go on vacation? Right. And there's a big presentation coming up, and someone can't wait until you get back, but wants to move forward on it. It could be used by them, knowing that you've already had a safe conversation with them. They know how to use the tool, you know, that it's like being fed stuff that you believe in and you've tested it. You could be on vacation, you could be at a conference, you could be somewhere, and people don't have to wait on you for that initial feedback. Sometimes as an employee, much like you, Melina, I do well with positive reinforcement. I am a fellow millennial, and there's nothing that bothers me more is that if something's not working and it's holding somebody back. So as a manager, I don't want to be your bottleneck. Run it through this first. And if you still have any issues, we can talk about it when I get back. It can get to that point where it becomes something that is used by you and your team together or by your team when you're not there.
And I think that's another good point. If I put my manager or leader hat on, I may prefer to receive information in a certain way. So
Mm-hmm.
I can lay that out and say, this is how I want information. If you're going to send me a PowerPoint to review, this is how I want it. You can create a custom GPT for that. And every time your team is going to send you something to review, it's put into the format that you prefer. We're getting ahead of ourselves
Yeah,
because what I
this is
wanted to
what
talk
happened.
about next is exactly this. What we just talked through is the entry level first step into using ChatGPT or Claude for helping you with feedback. But we've given some hints to what this can look like. I want to talk about this next level, the advanced level of using ChatGPT if you're a little bit experienced with the platform. And even if you're not, I encourage you to take it up a notch, to step it up and customize it more. And so, what Marissa and I are going to do is a demo of how we can do that. Now, before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about what that means. Custom GPT
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for you, for your team to help you provide feedback. And so I'm going to let you talk through, first of all, setting that up. What are some of the inputs you need to put in there? And then we can have a straight look at it and see what can come out of it.
Perfect. Well, just to set the levels, right? Level one of AI is I here's this thing and I need feedback on it. Or here's this situation. How can I make it sound better? You're just using that in the regular prompt. You open ChatGPT and it's like, what can I help you with? And you're like, this is what it can help me with. Second level is making those collections of examples or transcripts and things like that, creating a reference library for GPT to go back to. The third level, which we're about to talk about, is a custom GPT that's basically like you've collected, you've honed your way, you've collected all of the resources that you need, and you never want to have to type it into ChatGPT again. You just want to be able to go to it. It knows exactly what you need, it knows exactly where to look, and that's what custom GPTs can do for you. And there's a lot of different use cases for this, but in this case, you'll want to make sure that you are clear on what type of feedback model you're giving or how you want to give feedback. Is this feedback for a specific deliverable? Is this feedback for a performance? Is this feedback for, like, what is the feedback for? Is it just general feedback? However, you want to be really clear, because no matter what level you're using AI on, it very much follows the rule of garbage in and garbage out. So you want to be really clear, really specific as much as you can. And you're going to basically have, like, you're going to create instructions. You could just ask ChatGPT, honestly. You could say, like, hey, I want to create a GPT that does these things, and it'd be great. Here's the instructions that you can put in. And when you're in ChatGPT, you can click on GPTs and then create new, and you're going to be given this entirely new screen. I will mention you have to have a GPT Plus account, which is about $20 a month. So take that into consideration. When you do that, you basically just copy and paste those instructions. And then there's a section called knowledge files, which I'll show you the back end of the one that we built in a minute, where you are putting all of the information that you may have collected that it could reference here. So there
And
is a little bit of pre-work, but
I
it's
want to
not like,
interrupt. I'm going to
yeah.
interrupt you because Marissa's being very humble. Marissa took me from not knowing what in the world a custom GPT is to building tons of them myself. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed by some of these terms, Marissa's built fantastic tools to help you understand what in the world is a custom GPT, how you can build it. I promise you, it's not rocket science. You don't need a ton of technical skills, but Marissa also has some great guides. We'll link everything up so you have access to all this in one place. If you're feeling lost by some of the acronyms, don't worry.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
got you.
Tech people like to sound techy, but you don't
To
need
show
tech to
you
do this.
how we know. Exactly.
Yeah. You don't need to code at all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so you can see. I think that might give you some more references here. Let me get that going. Okay, so this is a look at a custom GPT, which means its own set of instructions and resources that I've set aside that I want to use all the time. This is a strengths feedback GPT for myself. I've put together a little scenario that, oh no, what if I missed a deadline? So this is already taken into account all, like, the way I want to give feedback, things about myself that I, like, the receiver of the feedback, which is also myself, would want to hear it. And so I'm going to say, hey, Marissa was the project manager on this high stakes project. It was client facing, missed a deadline. It's the first time something like this happened. I don't want to reprimand them, but I do want to offer support. This is very low level detail of what you need to have in there. The more details you get, the more details you're going to get out. Just to give an example, I'm copying and pasting what I want. And then I go ahead and put it in there. And then it's using this 4-part feedback model to break it down. You have a few minutes to talk about the project deadline. I noticed that the deadline was missed. Given how you usually juggle moving parts and help others stay aligned, this stood out as unusual. Can you walk me through what happened? And so that was put together by just having these couple lines. But could you imagine if we had put even more details, more things that would going on, the type of feedback that you could get?
Yeah.
And then you could use this to say, okay, that's great, but it doesn't sound like me. Here's an example of what I sound like. When you create a GPT, get back to the hows of it all. This is the back end of a GPT. You're going to get these instructions. Ask ChatGPT or use one of the tools I have given Melina to share that will make these instructions for you. You put the instructions in there. Here is my top 5 report from my strengths. This particular GPT is very Marissa focused, but it doesn't have to be. We could take this out. We could put Melina's in. We could put whatever. We can make 18 different copies if you have 18 different people on your team. If you really want to do that, you can. And you could add more. You could say, here is Marissa's last performance review. Here's her last self-evaluation. This is what she thinks of herself. It sounds really complicated, but it's really just a bunch of text boxes here on the back end, and ChatGPT puts it all together. You can change the picture, you can change a bunch of stuff that we won't get into now, but I just wanted you to see how simple it can be.
That's
on the
fantastic.
back end.
Can you go
So
back to what it gave you? Let's
yeah,
look at that closer because I think it's really fantastic. Let's pretend in this scenario that I'm the one giving you, Marissa, feedback that you missed a deadline and I don't know how to deal with it because you don't typically miss deadlines to the point of the prompt you put in there. And so, what's a way that I can communicate this? I really like this. So, it takes into account how you prefer to receive feedback. It brings in that positive of you're always on time. You're such a reliable employee. Is there something going on? So you're giving them an opportunity to talk through it as well. What you see here is a framework, right? Marissa mentioned a framework. There are lots of different feedback models, lots of different ones that you can use. You can take one that you like and say to ChatGPT on the back end, I want you to use this feedback model. This feedback model that we have here is a blended one that was created using several different models, but you can see that it frames that feedback in these 4 parts. Permission. So it's suggesting that I go to Marissa and say, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about the project timeline? Because one of the things that I know from the DISC workshops and assessments I do is that some folks don't like things being sprung on them. And
yeah, the
some
worst
people,
is getting that, like,
yeah,
can we talk?
exactly. Do you have a sec? Can we talk? Those are the worst Slack messages ever.
Yes.
Some people really prefer to have a little bit of a heads up and a little bit of a structure of, hey, do you have some time? I'd really love to talk through this presentation or this project. So you're getting their permission first. I love how it frames it in terms of the behavior. I noticed the final deadline was missed. That had a bit of an impact. A lot of times the feedback models will ask for that. And then it goes into impact, and I love that it goes into dialogue. Can you walk me through what happened? It opens the door to a conversation, so that feedback is much more of an exchange. I just really appreciate how this is framed. It takes into account Marissa's specific personality, strengths, how she prefers to receive information. In seconds, we were able to spit out something that can take a really long time, a lot of agony, a lot of awkwardness, a lot of discomfort, and can give a manager who wants to give feedback a framework to work from.
Yeah. And if I were a manager in the situation, I would feel more confident giving this feedback because it's taken into account all of those things. It can be so hard when giving feedback. It's not the only thing going on in your day, right? Like, it's not the only, there's so many other things going on. And like, when I was a manager, I want to give it that time and attention.
Yeah.
If I could have spent a week doing performance reviews, 1 week for every person, I would have collected all of the different examples that I could. I would have done all the things to make sure they have a full picture of what they're looking for. Using tools like this gives us an opportunity to collect all of those things throughout the year and then consider them when they're needed. There's that saying that a performance review should never be a surprise, right? If you're using tools like this, you can consistently give that feedback and make sure that person isn't surprised by what's coming through because you've already had these conversations and they were framed in this way.
I think the power of these kinds of tools to help us become better communicators is really remarkable. So I just want to do a final thing on this demo before we close and give you some direction on some tools that we've created and some resources to help you do this yourself. Let's say in the scenario that I've put in this GPT, it's told me this is how to communicate this to Marissa. What if I have some follow-up questions like, Marissa is really sensitive to feedback. Are there any ways to adjust this feedback so that she doesn't feel attacked or something like that?
Let's see what happens. Those are my strengths.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so
Yeah, this is
we
much better.
went.
I would really love to hear this.
See, this is what's great about some of these tools. You can go back and forth and say, this is good, but would you tweak it if I told you that Marissa's really sensitive? Last time I told her she did something wrong, she started bawling on camera. I'm making this up. But you can give that kind of context and see what comes out. Hey, Marissa, could we take a few minutes to debrief the current project together? I really value your insight and I want to make sure you're supported moving forward. I love
Yeah.
that. I would respond really well to that because what you're saying is, hey, you missed this deadline, but I know you never do that. So I think it's because I'm not supporting you enough. How can I do better? So you're kind of framing it in a
Yeah.
different way. I noticed the final deadline was missed and it had a ripple effect across a few teams. I know this is not typical for you and you care deeply about delivering to others. This
I
is so
do.
good. And then it goes into the impact and the dialogue. I love the dialogue. What was coming up for you during this project? Were there any challenges? I just want to make sure that you feel supported. I want to make sure that you feel like you have the resources you need. And so you open the door in that way. So this is you, Marissa, tell the audience
Yeah.
whether you like this feedback more than the other one.
I do like this feedback more than the other one because hearing things like, I really value your insight is super motivating for me. It's also not a lot of pressure, right? It's just tell me what you think, which is great, as opposed to fix this problem, which is something I like to do, but it's a different place in my brain, especially if I'm getting this conversation in the middle of the day or an email in my inbox. It's a little bit different. I really think that this impact part really speaks to the fact that this person sees me. They understand who I am and what I like to do. I know this is disappointing for you too, because I would probably feel bad that I didn't bring it up, that I didn't ask for help before I needed it, all of these things. So the fact that it's reflecting back to me the impact not only of the project, but the impact on me is really, really nice. And, like we could say, like, what if this was Marissa's eighth time doing this?
That's a good, if this is a repeat issue and you've talked about it before,
Yeah.
that's a great example.
So then, see, we're going to get some different things. Pattern has hopped up.
Okay, so Marissa, can we talk about a pattern I've been noticing around project timelines? I want to make sure we're on the same page and that you feel fully supported. So it's reframing it in terms of, okay, we've got an issue here, but let's make sure I'm supporting you. Like this is telling me there's a wider problem. I want to make sure we solve it together. I've noticed that across a few projects, deadlines haven't been met. I really appreciate how much you care. I know you care. So I want to make sure, what's missing here. And then it talks about the impact, this is having ripple effects, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd love to understand what's getting in the way. Are you stretched too thin? Are there barriers we're not seeing? I think your most recent point that you were just talking about is a lot of folks, especially what I've noticed with junior or mid-level professionals who don't want to rock the boat
Mm-hmm.
and don't want to say this isn't working or I need more support, keep it to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then it impacts things like deadlines or quality of work. But they're
Mm-hmm.
afraid to communicate it because they don't want to inconvenience their manager or be seen as causing problems. So, what this particular feedback does is it opens the door and allows that person to say, hey, actually, yeah, there are a couple things that are really inefficient that I'd really love to see improved. And if we could improve that, then I'm going to be able to deliver much more efficiently in the future.
Yeah, and hopefully this is not the first time I'm receiving this feedback if this is my eighth time doing this. But at the same time, it could be, depending on when I started to use these tools. Or I was busy enough and I wasn't paying attention to feedback and I wasn't doing all of the things to support this person being me. But you get it. Like there's just so many ways I think that this can help us slow down and really ground ourselves in the feedback process. We are all on the same team and we all want to do the same stuff. And that requires being able to see everyone for who they are. These conversations are the perfect way to show someone that you see them.
Yes, yes, yes. I know a lot of friends and colleagues and clients who are managers managing multiple people. When it comes to annual review time, it is one of the most stressful, uncomfortable weeks where people lose the most sleep because you're having to have
Yeah.
these conversations. This is great for annual review time, quarterly review time. It's great for salary and promotion discussions. I mean, this can be used in so many ways. To close, there's so much more we can do and talk about with this. Marissa and I wanted to put together a couple tools, a couple templates that you can use to do this yourself. We just ask that you send one or both of us a message with your email and we'll send it to you. We'll also include a link to the form. You just fill that out and we'll send it right over to you. It's going to have a bunch of great topics, templates, tools, and tips, lots of T's, to help you do this and leverage this. But hopefully, this conversation sparked some interest, sparked some intrigue about how you can use this. And most importantly, please don't avoid giving feedback.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. Now, feedback is so important to our own personal and professional growth. It's also important to our role as leaders and managers. In my P20 leadership development programs, giving and receiving feedback well is an entire module. That's how important it is. So I spend time training leaders on how to give feedback and how to ask for feedback. And so this is not a skill set to be ignored, however awkward it feels. I'm really thankful that Marissa has stepped into the conversation with her very deep and very broad technical and AI expertise to help us see how we can use some of these tools to be better leaders when it comes to feedback.
Thanks so much for having me, Melina. I think past me would definitely have loved this conversation and really have needed the tools that we talked about today. It was great talking through all the examples, and I look forward to hearing what everyone think. Like, let us know. Like, I really want to know. Like, what do you think? What do you think of this? And start a conversation, because there's many more things that we can use this for that we haven't thought of.
Absolutely. And Marissa and I work together all the time. If we want her to come back and do another demo on something else related to management, leadership, or feedback, let us know in the comments and we'll make it happen. Thank you, Marissa. And thank you, everyone, for watching and learning and investing your time in being a better leader.